The cold winds of 1944 swept across France as German tank crews strained their eyes through the morning haze. Suddenly, out of the mist came the dreaded silhouettes of Sherman tanks. Yet they did not move like ordinary machines. They advanced with precision, shifting as if directed by a single unseen hand. Each tank protected the other, their movements perfectly timed, leaving the enemy shaken. No signal flags waved, no flares burst, no messengers darted between them. Still, the Shermans acted as one unified beast. To German crews, it seemed unnatural. Inside their Panzer IVs and Panthers, commanders fought with radios that barely worked under pressure. Static filled their ears. Voices broke apart and vital words were lost in the growl of engines. Their few G5 radios, once considered advanced, were weak in range and fragile in combat. Worse, most tanks carried only receivers. They could hear but not reply. A platoon leader could issue orders, but if his tank was destroyed, the others were left confused, stranded without direction. The Americans, however, brought something different to the battlefield, something invisible yet devastating. Their tanks were armed not only with guns, but with crystal-controlled FM radios that cut through the chaos. With 25 watts of power, voices carried clearly across miles, even through gunfire and smoke. These radios allowed every Sherman to speak and respond instantly, turning scattered tanks into a tightly woven force. This revolution had been planned years earlier. In July 1941, the U.S. standardized new radios, the SCR 508, 528, and 538, ensuring every medium tank carried them. While German engineers stuck to older AM sets, American designers at Galvin Manufacturing, later known as Motorola, were perfecting FM systems for combat. Daniel Noble envisioned the idea, while Henrik Magnusky solved the practical challenges of fitting complex electronics inside heavy steel machines. Their creation was rugged, stable, and built to last under fire. Each SCR 508 weighed about 181 pounds but transformed the way tanks fought. Its BC 604 transmitter produced more than double the power of German sets, reaching ranges of up to 15 miles when stationary. The system allowed 10 preset channels, locked with crystal accuracy. German crews had to adjust dials constantly as their frequencies drifted, but American radios stayed firm, no matter how rough the ride. Another breakthrough lay in their design, the use of frequency modulation. Edwin Armstrong's FM principle eliminated the static that plagued AM signals. German radios picked up interference from every spark plug, every motor, and every nearby explosion. American radios ignored it all, carrying only the human voice, sharp and steady. When U.S. tanks landed during Operation Torch in November 1942, they brought this advantage ashore. The Afrika Korps, battle-hardened and skilled, soon faced an opponent that fought like no other. In a typical German platoon of 5 tanks, only 1 or 2 had full radios. Destroy the commander's tank and the others were left voiceless. American platoons, by contrast, had every vehicle ready to transmit. Each Sherman could lead if needed, ensuring formations never collapsed under fire. The difference became undeniable at the Battle of Kasserine Pass in February 1943. While the Germans won a tactical victory, they were disturbed by what they saw. American tanks spread across nearly 50 miles maneuvered in flawless unity. They called in artillery, warned one another of threats, and regrouped in ways that stunned their foes. German intelligence reports marveled at the clarity of U.S. transmissions, noting how American voices carried with uncanny steadiness, while their own radios dissolved into noise. The few G5, Germany's standard tank set, simply could not compete. Operating on higher frequencies with a mere 10 watts of power, its signals were fragile and short-lived. In ideal conditions, perhaps a mile or 2 could be reached, but in motion, even that shrank. Worse, static drowned everything. The more German tanks moved, the less they could speak. By 1943, when the Allies invaded Italy, this gap became even clearer. Italy's rugged mountains and deep valleys broke German radio links completely. American FM sets, however, worked across terrain where AM signals failed. Reports told of Shermans maintaining contact across ridges and valleys, as if the obstacles did not exist. For German crews, silence often meant fighting in isolation. For American crews, connection meant survival. The decisive moment came on D-Day, June 6, 1944. As Shermans rolled onto the beaches of Normandy, their radios linked them not just to each other, but to the ships offshore. Naval guns could be called directly by tank crews, smashing German defenses with devastating precision. Yet even then, a flaw appeared. Tank radios operated between 20.0 and 27.9 MHz, while infantry sets used higher bands. Soldiers and tanks could not talk directly, leaving Shermans exposed to lurking German infantry with Panzerfausts. But American innovation moved quickly. Crews mounted field telephones on the backs of their tanks, connected to the internal intercom. Now infantry could grab a handset and speak straight to the tank crew. By Operation Cobra in July 1944, this change had revolutionized coordination. Tanks and infantry fought as a single organism, reacting faster than their opponents. General Edward Brooks commanded hundreds of Shermans that moved like extensions of each other. Against Panzer Lehr, one of Germany's best divisions, this unity proved unstoppable. The irony was brutal for Germany. They had once pioneered the use of radios in armored warfare. Heinz Guderian, the architect of Blitzkrieg, had insisted on them in the 1930s. His early victories were built on the ability to coordinate swiftly. Yet by 1943, German factories could not keep up. Shortages, bombing, and lack of resources meant radios were reserved for commanders or special vehicles, while thousands of tanks rolled into battle half-deaf. The Soviet Union struggled even more. Their T-34s, built in the tens of thousands, often lacked radios altogether. Orders were given by flags or shouted across the din. In 1941, this failure led to catastrophe against German armor. Only later, with American Lend-Lease equipment, did things improve slightly. A fraction of command tanks were fitted with SCR-508 sets, but by war's end, most Soviet tanks still went into combat mute. This made America's achievement stand out. While others fought blind, the U.S. ensured every Sherman could speak. Motorola's factory in Chicago worked tirelessly, turning out radios that contained nearly 3,000 parts each. Crystals had to endure harsh conditions without drifting. Production required precision and scale, something only America's industrial might could provide. By 1944, tens of thousands of radios ensured that no Sherman fought in silence. The strength of the SCR-508 was not just in its power, but in its reliability. While German crews fought with drifting dials and fading signals, American tankers trusted their channels to hold steady. 10 preset frequencies allowed them to switch instantly if one became crowded. German radios required constant adjustment, often in the middle of battle, wasting precious seconds. Inside the Sherman, crew coordination reached a new level. The BC-606 intercom let the driver, gunner, loader, and commander speak clearly, despite the deafening roar of the 400-horsepower engine. Throat microphones and cushioned headsets ensured every command was heard. German crews, often without intercoms, relied on shouting, hand signals, or frantic tapping on shoulders. In the chaos of combat, those seconds lost could mean destruction. American radios also adapted smoothly to power variations. Whether a tank used 12 or 24 volts, the SCR-508 automatically adjusted, its dynamotor filtering out noise from the vehicle's electrical systems. German sets were wired directly, making them vulnerable to interference from their own spark plugs and motors. Their voices dissolved into static whenever their tanks moved. This invisible advantage changed American doctrine. Instead of rigid formations, in April, the Ruhr Pocket revealed the crushing power of American communication. The 1st and 9th Armies closed around more than 300,000 German troops in perfect synchronization. Forward air controllers using tank radios guided fighter bombers to smash German supply routes and command centers. Inside the pocket, German divisions collapsed into isolated fragments. Reports spoke of silence. No orders from above, no contact with neighbors, no ability to fight as one. For U.S. crews, radios provided reassurance. Even when scattered, they knew they were connected. A single call could bring support, warn allies, or summon artillery. German tankers, by contrast, often fought blind, their world shrinking to the view through their own gun sight. Otto Carius, one of Germany's finest commanders, later wrote of the despair that came from such isolation. Without communication, Even the most skilled tankmen were helpless. Patton's lightning advance across France in 1944 owed everything to radios. His armored columns moved more than 60 miles in a day, shifting direction at a moment's notice. German observers could not believe such maneuvers possible without visible signals. They failed to see that invisible voices tied the columns together, turning confusion into speed. Even German high command saw the truth. Heinz Guderian admitted in late 1944 that American coordination erased the advantage of German tank quality. Superior firepower meant little when faced with an enemy that moved like a single organism. When Allied experts examined captured German radios after the war, the verdict was harsh. They were labeled outdated, at least 5 years behind American systems. The absence of FM, the shortage of full transceivers, and the lack of shielding against interference made them fatally flawed. The Soviets, too, dismissed German designs. Instead, they copied American concepts, fitting post-war T-54s and T-55s with radios modeled on the SCR-508. Numbers exposed the gap completely. America built over 50,000 radios, enough for every Sherman. Germany built more than 12,000 medium and heavy tanks, but only around 6,000 full sets. Most of their machines rolled into combat unable to speak. American signals reached 7 miles in motion, 15 when still. German sets struggled to cover a single mile on the move. Artillery response times told the same story. U.S. units could unleash fire within 3 to 5 minutes. German requests often took 20 or more. Those lost minutes turned battles. American tanks fought with reliable support almost every time. German tanks often waited for help that came too late, or not at all. The effect of this invisible advantage was devastating. German tanks might carry thicker armor or fire heavier guns, but they often fought as isolated machines. American Shermans, linked by radios, became parts of a greater whole. What seemed like ordinary tanks turned into a unified force, striking with speed and precision. This was not only a battlefield change, but a glimpse into the future. The idea that machines could act as a network, rather than as individuals, would later be called network-centric warfare. In 1942, it was already being practiced, though no one had named it yet. Each Sherman was not simply a tank. It was a node in a vast web, connected by invisible waves of sound. The results were visible in every campaign. At Aricourt, Shermans defeated Panthers. At Remagen, radios secured a bridge that reshaped the war in Germany. In the Ruhr, radios helped trap more than 300,000 German soldiers. At every turn, communication, not armor, not guns, proved decisive. By 1945, the Americans had achieved what Germany once dreamed of. Nearly 50,000 Shermans carried full radios, while German industry never managed to equip even half its tanks properly. The Wehrmacht, once the pioneer of Blitzkrieg, ended the war fighting in silence. For German crews, the psychological toll was immense. Isolation bred fear. Without orders or updates, many fought blind, unsure of where allies or enemies stood. Otto Carius described the despair of trying to lead men without being able to reach them. A destroyed command tank meant chaos, leaving platoons stranded. For American crews, the radios meant confidence. Even in confusion, they could call for artillery or reinforcements. Even in isolation, they could warn others. They fought with the knowledge that their voices would always be heard. The technical differences underscored this divide. American SCR-508 radios held crystal frequencies steady, immune to drift. German sets wandered, demanding constant adjustments that wasted precious seconds. American crews switched between 10 preset channels instantly. German crews fiddled with dials. American sets ignored static. German sets drowned in it. Inside the tanks, the contrast was just as sharp. The BC-606 intercom system gave every Sherman crew full communication. A driver could warn of terrain. A loader could shout a reload complete. A gunner could call targets. German crews shouted above roaring engines or tapped one another's shoulders, losing seconds that often proved fatal. The impact extended beyond tanks. American doctrine evolved around radios, allowing the creation of ad hoc combat commands that blended tanks, infantry, and artillery. Radios tied them together, turning them into flexible, fast-moving units. German doctrine, unable to rely on such communication, remained rigid, bound to pre-planned formations. Even artillery revealed the difference. U.S. fire support often arrived within 3 to 5 minutes of a request. German artillery, relying on slower methods, took 15 minutes or more. In modern battle, that gap decided survival. The irony was not lost on German leaders. Heinz Guderian, once the champion of radio warfare, admitted by late 1944 that American communication had erased German technical superiority. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel summed it up at surrender. "We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together. The Americans had not won with the strongest tank or the thickest armor. They had won with the most powerful weapon of all, information." The Soviets recognized this lesson as well. Their wartime T-34s had often fought mute, guided by flags or hand signals. After the war, they adopted radios modeled on American sets. The T-54 and T-55 became fully networked machines, designed to fight as part of a larger system. West Germany, rebuilding its forces, equipped every Leopard tank with advanced radios, ensuring they never repeated their wartime mistake. This legacy echoed into the late 20th century. In the Gulf War of 1991, coalition forces faced Iraqi armor that was often technically solid but poorly connected. Once again, communication decided the outcome. U.S. tanks and aircraft networked across land and sky, overwhelmed isolated Iraqi units in days. 2003, the same pattern repeated. American tanks rolled into Iraq not as individuals. By the spring of 1945, the outcome was undeniable. American armored divisions moved like living organisms, each Sherman tied to the others by unseen voices. The Wehrmacht, once the master of coordination, now fought in fragments. Their most advanced machines, the Panthers and Tigers, were reduced to lone hunters, powerful but isolated. Against them came swarms of Shermans that spoke as one. At Remagen, that unity turned chance into history. The discovery of the Ludendorff Bridge might have been just a small success, but with radios, it became a turning point. Within minutes, the message spread. Within hours, reinforcements poured across. The Germans could not respond. Their telephone lines were destroyed, their radios too weak, their counterattacks scattered. By the time they understood, the bridgehead had grown into a flood that poured into Germany's heart. In April, the Ruhr Pocket marked the final collapse. More than 300,000 German troops were trapped by American armies that coordinated entirely through radio networks. Tank crews spoke to infantry, artillery, and aircraft with seamless ease. German units, cut off from each other, broke apart in silence. Field Marshal Walter Model himself admitted that without communication, coordination was impossible. His army dissolved not because of lack of courage, but because they could no longer act as one. For the Americans, radios were lifelines. They gave confidence in chaos, order in confusion, and speed in decision. Tankers knew that even if scattered, they were never alone. Every Sherman carried the same ability to call, to warn, to lead. That equality made the entire force resilient. For German tankers, silence was the enemy. Even the most skilled commander could not fight blind. Destroy the leader, and the platoon collapsed. Static drowned voices, dials drifted, and orders failed. Courage could not fill the silence, and bravery could not replace clarity. The statistics told the truth with brutal clarity. The United States built nearly 50,000 Shermans and over 50,000 radios to match them. Germany built thousands of advanced tanks, but not enough radios to give them purpose. American sets reached 7 miles in motion, 15 when still. German sets, weak and unstable, barely stretched a mile. Artillery support, summoned by radio, arrived in minutes for the Americans and often never arrived for the Germans. After the war, historians and engineers alike studied the difference. They concluded that the Sherman's radios were as decisive as its armor or gun. Without them, the tank might have remained mediocre. With them, it became the beating heart of an armored network. German tanks, no matter how advanced, remained isolated. And isolation in modern war meant defeat. The lesson carried into the future. NATO's doctrine was built on the principle of communication supremacy. West Germany equipped every Leopard tank with advanced radios, ensuring never again would its armor fight in silence. The Soviets, having seen their mute T-34s torn apart, fitted their T-54s and T-55s with radios inspired by American designs. The age of networked warfare had begun. The echoes of this truth appeared in every conflict that followed. In the Gulf War of 1991, coalition forces with seamless communication crushed Iraqi units despite their heavier armor. In 2003, American units again showed that networks overwhelm platforms. The same principle repeated: the side that talks wins, the side that fights in silence loses. The story of the Sherman's radio was not about a single invention, but about the transformation of war itself. A tank that might have been average became deadly when multiplied by thousands and linked by voices. Invisible signals gave it strength greater than steel, turning weakness into power. Field Marshal Keitel's words at surrender captured the truth. We knew how to build better tanks, but you knew how to make them work together. In that sentence lay the verdict of the war. The Germans had brilliance in machines, but the Americans had brilliance in connection. By the war's end, the Sherman stood as proof of a new law of combat. Guns and armor mattered, but they were nothing without unity. Radios turned tanks into more than vehicles. They turned them into a single living network. The final lesson was stark and absolute. In modern warfare, connection is survival. Isolation is defeat. Across deserts, forests, and cities, that truth decided battles again and again. And in 1945, it helped decide the fate of the world.